All right, here we are at Sound Advice, and today on Sound Advice I'm going to show you the sound that I used at the opening of the show. And basically I'm using a harmonizer, or actually a pitch shifter, which is similar to a harmonizer. If you have a harmonizer, it will work. If you have a pitch shifter, it will work. And what it is basically a harmonizer or pitch shifter is going to add a note to whatever note you play, and you can control which note it adds out of the scale. For example, in this case, where I'm hitting this note here, I'm playing a D, right, but it's adding a lower A below it, which is 5 half steps down below my original note. Okay, and what I did was the settings I have, and if you have your pitch shifter or your harmonizer, you're going to want to set it this way. Have your direct level at 100%. That's your main guitar sound. And in this case, I've got my guitar running through distortion and reverb before it's hitting the pitch shifter. And then what your direct level will be there, your affected level, the pitch shifted level will be at 60% of your direct level. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to take the pitch of that and drop it down 5 half steps. And this creates that little bit lower. It's almost like an inverted power chord effect. It's kind of a trippy effect, but it sounds great when you're using single note lines. Okay, let's take a listen to what it sounds like. Now, given the fact that we've got 2 notes going at the same time, you probably can't play power chords or any other chord with it necessarily. It's going to get real muddy. So it's basically a setting that you would use for a solo. You might hear stuff like Rage Against the Machine. I think he uses a similar effect to this in his, although a lot of times he'll throw this same effect through a whammy pedal, which makes it even gnarlier. But the basic effect here is really kind of fun to play around with. So if you have a pitch shifter or a harmonizer on your whatever effects you're using, go ahead and try these settings out. I think you'll really dig it. All right, this week's email comes from James L. And James wants to know, is there any particular way to find the notes on the neck without memorizing the fingerboard? And the answer is yes, there really is. It's pretty much something you should know, is how to find your notes on the neck. And there's a couple ways to do that. First off, you need to know what the musical alphabet is. And the musical alphabet is A through G and then back to A. So essentially, you can play the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it starts back over at A. There's no H note or J note or L note, etc. Also, you need to know your open string names. Hopefully most of you know this, but if not, I'll tell you real quick. The 6th string is an open E, the 5th is A, the 4th is D, 3rd is G, 2nd is B, and the 1st is E again. Now basically, to find your notes on the neck, you have to know what your starting note is and then know the formula. And the formula goes like this. Every note, from one note to the next note, has a whole step, and a whole step being 2 frets, half step being 1 fret. So from one note to the next is a whole step, though. So we're saying from each note to each note is 2 frets. But there's 2 exceptions. The 2 exceptions are from B to C and from E to F. And in both those cases, you're only going to go a half step or 1 fret. So the way this would work would be this. If we start with our 5th string open, that's our open A. Okay, with our open A, we'd have to go up 2 frets because we said all notes are a whole step, A to B. 1, 2. So on B, our 2nd fret would be our B. But now B to C is one of the exceptions, so that would only be 1 fret up to C. Then we have whole steps again, C to D, D to E, and then E is our other exception. E to F would be a half step. F to G would be a whole step, and then G back up to A, and it would start all over again. A to B, B to C, etc. So the way to practice that would be to do exactly what I just did there. Randomly pick a string and then count up that string. Now, you're going to notice that there's notes in between the whole steps. And those are always going to be the accidentals, the sharps or the flats. They're also known as enharmonics. What we have here is basically from each note. Let's start on the C. So we'll start on the 5th string, A, whole step up to B, half step to C. Now let's look at C to D. What we have is this. If I move C up a half step, that's called sharping that note. So this would be called a C sharp. If we go from D and down, that's going to be known as a D flat. So in between each note, we have C sharp or D flat. Basically, whatever the lower of the 2 notes is to move into the middle note would be the sharp, and the higher of the 2 notes going down would be the flat. So let's count the open A string all the way up, counting sharps and flats. We have our open A, move up a half step would be A sharp or B flat. Then we have B, C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, E, F, F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp or A flat, and then back up to A. So try to practice that on each one of the strings. Now also keep in mind when we start on a different string, we're starting with a different note. If we start with the third string, we're starting with the G. So that means we have to start from G, go up a whole step to A, whole step to B, half step to C, etc. So make sure you pay attention to what your starting note is. Whatever string is, whatever the note is open is going to be your starting note. So play around with that. Another good way to practice this would be to take your right hand, throw it down on the fingerboard, call out what string you're on. In this case, I'm on the 5th string. That would be the A string. Use my left hand and count up to it. A, whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D, and then it's a half step up from D, which is a D sharp, or also an E flat. And that's a really great way to practice. That will help you to memorize the open string names, because you have to find the open string name real quick, and it'll also help you to practice the pattern of every note having a whole step between it, except B to C and E to F having the half steps. So get to work and find your notes on the neck.